Okay, we welcome you to another episode of Learning Stories. This is a show where we profile a diverse set of learners from the 21st century. In each episode of this show, we interview a guest who has a story to share about how they acquired a set of skills and knowledge in a creative and innovative manner. In the process, we hope to uncover a new understanding of learning as conceptualized, narrated, and imagined by the guest on our show. Today's guest, Divieta Sahajwala, is someone whose journey I've been following for a long time, and I always found it inspiring how she created a path for herself in the world of dance. And just to give you a little background about Divieta before we jump into the conversation, and hopefully I will be doing less of the talking and you'd be able to hear more from Divieta. But Divieta is a dancer currently living in New York City. She graduated from the certificate program at Perry Dance Center in the ballet and contemporary track in June 2021. With a background in Odissi, which is an Indian classical dance form, um, jazz, contemporary movement, and street commercial forms, she has now started to venture into ballroom dancing as well. A performer and an instructor, she hopes to take on various venues of dancing in one of the capitals of dance in the world. So Divita, that's about your that's a little bit about you, but I wanted to backtrack a little before we go into the world of dance. I'm curious about what you were like as a student growing up. What was where did you grow up? What were some of your earliest childhood influences? Your parents and some of these subjects you were maybe interested in at school, or anything else you'd like to tell us about Divita as a child growing up.
So, I am actually from Rajasthan, from Ajmer, a small town in Rajasthan. And growing up, both my parents were always working. So I actually kind of grew up with my grandparents. And when I think I was about the age of 9, I went to a boarding school for the next 9 years of my life. That is where I was actually introduced to Indian classical. Prior to that, I saw a lot of Bollywood movies and a lot of music videos whenever I used to have free time. And I still remember stand in front of the TV and try and copy the heroines' dance steps or the background dancers' dance steps. And that's where I used to hear a lot of people say to me, "Oh my God, that's actually pretty uncanny, and that is actually very graceful. You're managing to do that and understand uh, pretty much the exact movements and the right limbs to move." So for a kid, that was pretty interesting for a lot of people. Anyway, fast track, we go into boarding school. I think I was about in eighth grade when I was kind of discovered by a choreographer who had come to visit and kind of work with some of us dancers in the boarding school. And he really encouraged me to go ahead and take dancing up. He said, think about it, start training as soon as you get the opportunity, continue your Indian classical training. And I think I was always inclined to I was inclined towards dancing from a very young age. But it's just that I did not get the exposure to Western dancing at a young age. I got it when I was about the age of 20. That's when I went for my first jazz class, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is something I always wanted to try. So growing up, while I wasn't very studious, but at the same time, I was a good student. Um, I think I really enjoyed literature. I enjoyed, yes, mathematics. I kind of considered myself to be a logical person. So I think I got those things from my parents as well as my grandparents. So I, when it came to kind of deciding on which stream to choose, for example, to study further, I found it extremely hard. Deep down, I kind of wanted to take art because that's where I felt that I was more inclined and kind of had a flair for. However, when you're young, your parents are trying to guide you, and they're like, you should take up science. If you don't know, you will still be safe. You can always change your stream, things like that. So I kind of compromised, and I said, okay, I will go ahead and take up commerce.
Okay.
So basically, long story short, I ended up choosing commerce, in which my primary focus became economics, and I enjoyed economics a lot in that. And economics, along with statistics and politics, like political science. So these things kind of interest me. So actually, that is of relevance because that also kind of drives a lot of artists to
Mm.
create different work. So I guess that is where a lot of my thoughts and influences started to come from at a very young age. All of that kind of just mixed up. So nothing was irrelevant just because I chose dancing later in my life.
Mm.
Everything prior to that makes me who I am as well. So it wasn't like a new life when I, turned 2021. So I still remember, I think I was about to finish school when I
Mm-hmm.
was watching this one episode of So You Think You Can Dance.
Yeah.
And I remember watching this one couple I don't remember the name of anymore.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I'm going to dance like that someday. I really want to do it. Today, I can say that I can do pretty much all those steps which I saw back then.
Wow. That's
Pretty
amazing.
much. About 70 to 80% I can do.
Wow.
The only thing that is kind of like missing in me would have been like gymnastics. But if I get like support with a partner, I can do those moves too, some of them. So
Wow.
I think it was just like I kind of visualized myself doing that, and this is where I am today, moving towards it more for like even more towards it.
Wow, that's such an amazing story there, because as children, I think there are so many things that catch our attention, but you were able to follow that initial curiosity into actually not only visualizing it back then, but manifesting it in your life today, and I, I mean, I know everyone, can dance, and I love dancing when I'm in a social situation with friends, and I think it's just such a wonderful way to get connected to your body and also understand how you can connect to other people in a social setting. And what I find fascinating is that almost every culture in the world has its own dance form, and I know both of us are from India, and almost I think each state in the country has something unique related to dance and the performing arts, and there's such a wonderful history to that culture. But not just India, but every country in the world, in a lot of ways, has something that represents their values and beliefs in the form of this wonderful performing art. But like as a child, if someone wants to take up dance, because a lot of the listeners of this podcast are youngsters or students that are still in university, and even parents, or other young people that want to take up dance. So if you do want to learn dance, what are some of the possible pathways um, that you can look up as a student?
I think while there is advantage in starting early,
Hmm.
um, more than half the time people being like whoever's interested in dancing as well as their relatives. They are just scared that the industry will not support you because only the top dancers get booked or paid. And while that is true, I have also come to realize that no matter how good or bad you are, somehow or the other, you are going to find a place for yourself.
Oh,
It is, how do I say it quite right? Everyone who goes ahead and pursues a law degree is not the top lawyer of a country.
true. Yeah. Yeah.
I have seen so many lawyers sitting outside, say, Ajmer court, you know,
Yeah. For
doing
sure.
basic paperwork.
Yeah.
What was the whole point if that is how you want to go ahead and spend the rest of your life? You might as well just go ahead and pursue what you truly like, and you're gonna, even if the monetary reward doesn't come through as fast as you wish to,
Yeah.
um, you're still gonna get a lot of create creativity going, as well as a lot of self validation, because you know what you're developing rather than developing something which you've only been told to do.
Sure.
If you want to start dancing, the best way is to actually get yourselves enrolled into classes.
Okay.
A lot of, I have worked with academies in the past in India, and now I am working again in a studio, and I'm actually working as an instructor, as I've stated earlier. And I see a lot of people who are interested in dancing take a couple of classes and then they kind of leave,
Okay.
and they do not go ahead and pursue it simply because they cannot think that they could reach a certain level of skill set in dancing, and something which is going to, like, a certain level which will make them enjoy the flow of this form.
Okay. Okay.
So instead of, just being a student, at least becoming kind of an amateur. A
Mm.
lot of people don't believe that that's possible for them. And the only way you can really actually get into anything in life is practicing.
True.
So get yourself enrolled in classes and practice, invest. It's just like how you would invest in studying to become a chartered accountant or to become a lawyer or to become a doctor, how you would go ahead and invest in a tutor. Go ahead and invest in a dance instructor. Go ahead, just like the way you would invest in a gym trainer.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to go ahead and become a bodybuilder,
True.
but you're still going ahead and investing in a personal trainer. Why is that?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So anytime, be it whether you're trying to be a professional or whether you're trying to pursue it as a hobby, you need to invest certain number of hours with an instructor at least. And that's not a short amount. If you really enjoy it, go ahead and do it, because it's really going to benefit you. It may not benefit you monetarily,
Yeah.
but it will benefit you to connect and to feel something bigger than just yourself and what life you're living. So
Wow.
that's, I think, where you want to start. Just enroll, go
Yeah.
for it.
Yep, and that's a great starting point, Divita. I think a lot of us think that we have to figure everything out on our own with regards to dance. But what you said, if you wanted to go to the gym, you would maybe have someone guide you over there. Similarly, I think there are lots of benefits to having a mentor or an instructor that understands the nitty-gritties of the dance form to actually guide you through that process, and I think that can keep the motivation going. And I think it's because I work in an elementary school right now, Devita, and I see my kids. They're very often a lot of the curriculum is structured around sitting in rows and desks, or sitting down for a long time. And they do have physical education, which is one or two classes a week. But I was always there's no block dedicated to only dance, though there is a block dedicated to music. And I always started wondering why so, because I think dance is as important as any other performing art, whether it's art, I mean, the visual arts or music. So why don't we have a block for dance, And that's something as a teacher, I started thinking about, because I think at a young age it's so important for children to not only connect to their physical bodies, but understand how they can use it to express themselves. You don't only have to use words to express emotions. You can and some of the most amazing dance performances I've seen, and if you do get a chance, please do follow Devita on Instagram. I think she's got some wonderful performance pieces there that are, and I think you can capture a lot of emotions in dance and communicate it in this wonderful, beautiful way. For someone that doesn't know too much about dance, Devita, if you had to tell me a little bit about the different types of dance forms around the world, and how are they different from each other in terms of physical movement. I'm just very curious about it, as someone that wants to understand the art better, but I think I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So the world that I have kind of gotten into for dancing is more on the concert side.
Okay.
So while I started, every society has their own dance forms and art forms, and most of the societies actually start their dancing from their folk dancing.
Okay.
And all of those dancing, the dancing usually happens primarily to celebrate some or the other event.
Okay.
Um, but when you see the concert world, that kind of has now become more formal and commercialized. A lot of other dancing which you see, which is on TV as background dancers for various artists, etc., comes from basically entertainment element of street folk dancing. It is again that is highly commercialized primarily because of the artists you're dancing behind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there is no real particular way of distinguishing based on body movement.
Okay.
Because I have seen different dance forms imbibe soft as well as harsh or very clear staccato movements as well. So I think it is more about the purpose or the mannerism of your dancing. So the dance world that I am in currently is more on the concert side, which primarily stems from ballet world. Ballet came from a lot of concert come folk dancing in France, and that's where it was developed and codified. And then later, with one of their kings, it became more of a formal event. So if you see similarly in Indian classical dance forms, I will not really say Bharatnatyam for that, but various other forms such as maybe Kathak and Odissi, they all were basically eventually codified and they were all done either for appeasement of the royal family or for uh, offerings to gods and deities. Um, so when you come up with these things, it creates a lot of body movement. But today, in today's day and age, there a lot of dancers have also kind of broken away from those codified dance forms and structures and started to destructure and mix various forms. And that is what contemporary really stands for.
Oh.
So if you see the contemporary dancing, which was taking place in primarily a lot of Europe and America in 60s, 50s, 70s, 1900s, of course, they were breaking away primarily from ballet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in today's day and age, contemporary is breaking away from ballet, the contemporary, which is now called modern, which came after ballet. They're also breaking away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're coming up with a whole new idea of movement, which does have that technique and skill, but there's a lot more freedom that comes with it to experiment with your skeleton and your movement and your energy and different dance styles. So, for example, in the city of New York, you're going to have different contemporary dancers who are going to bring in different flavors. So there are, say, maybe some Hispanic dancers who are going to bring in their flavors. There are some Indian dancers who are going to bring in their flavors to the contemporary movement. There are Black dancers who are going to bring in their movement and their flavor to it. So it is a very interesting period. Sometimes it can get very abstract. So for a common or a lay person, it's like, what are they doing? But it's you need to you need to also understand we are living in an era of being entertained in a very to the point manner.
Mm-hmm.
So there is nothing really left to your imagination.
For sure.
And a lot of people are not very perceptive anymore. So I think a lot of lay people will be challenged if they go ahead and watch these performances or concerts because that is where their imagination, their perception and their compassion are, those levels are pushed.
Mm.
So as a dancer today, you can go from being a ballet dancer to being a contemporary dancer to being just a movement artist, not with any company at all, doing your own creations, or you can be a Broadway theater dancer, or you can be with a jazz company, or you can be a street dancer creating various street hip hop, heels, voguing pieces, which
Mm.
are again very, very, very expressive of marginalized society
For sure.
way
Yeah.
of living.
Yeah.
So there is basically no real limitation to dancers anymore as there used to be.
Got it.
There are no rules or backgrounds to it. So when you see it from outside and you're not very aware of dancing, all I can say is jump in,
Hmm.
go to performances, because after seeing the first 10 performances, you're going to start linking to different other things which are happening culturally, being dance, music, theater, etc. So the best way to start is just look up your nearest dance company and dig in, dive in.
Awesome. Yep.
That's how you get through.
I mean, I really like how you articulated your thoughts about it, Divit, and I feel like you've put a lot of thought into this. And just in terms of how you spoke about, how the more classical structured forms, at a particular time they served a purpose, but now, with the contemporary styles, there is this ability to also bring in your own culture into the larger cultural discourse, right? And I think that's amazing because it shows you that dance is also responding to the world of the people that it coexists in, and I think that is a very powerful way for humans to not only express their understanding of the world at a particular time, but also say something more and challenge us to think beyond. And I think any work of art, whether it's literature or music, in a lot of ways, it helps us not only challenge our thinking, but also helps us imagine possibilities that we may have not been exposed to on a day-to-day basis. And
Exactly. And that is not to say that those classical forms do not exist.
Mhm.
They are your foundation. They actually help you a lot more than you can really imagine, because it is something which one of our artistic directors, when I was back home, he says that you cannot destructure if you don't have a structure. So, you can't just become a dancer without really knowing what your crux is. And it's also really interesting because dancing also kind of shows how your society is evolving.
Mhm.
Big time, big time. It shows the kind of dances that, you know, are highlighted in a particular period of time. The society lives in that format
Oh, okay.
or code. So, for example, when you had ballet peaking at its, when it was peaking, you had a society which was a little more, um, trying to be a little more maybe civilized,
Yeah,
maybe more restrictive,
for sure.
thinking these things are, this is what the right way or the correct way of living is,
Mhm.
whereas this is not okay. This is primitive. This is uncivilized,
So
you
would you
know.
say it was a class battle in some way? And
Of course, dance always ends up reflecting the human condition.
wow, okay,
That's
that's really deep.
something which I have always felt.
Hmm.
It is, it also goes on to the individual level. The way you dance with somebody, especially when you're doing a lot of partner dancing, the way someone is dancing with you is who they are in their life.
Yeah, because it's such an intimate. I mean, it's such an intimate act, right? When you are opening up to another person in that way, and I think, yeah, I completely agree. And I never thought about that
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
feel.
Your body reflects and moves the way you are in your mind. So that is the reason why your body will always, if you're a rigid person, your body is going to be rigid when you're on the dance floor. If you're a fluid person, it's going to be more fluid. If you're a little more structured in your mind, you're going to be more coordinated in your movements. So you can see these things in, you can see, like, for example, if you're working with various wedding couples, you can see what their equation is
Hmm.
simply by the way they dance and they interact on the dance floor.
So do you?
Similarly,
Sorry, go ahead.
when it builds up, yeah, when it builds up, it kind of reflects the society.
Hmm. No, but do you think it also transfers the other way around, Devita, for someone that is that physically feels a lot more rigid, and do you feel like the ability to open up through dancing can transfer onto their personal and professional lives and the way they look at the world and approach it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, Absolutely. It's just like many times when you read a lot of wellness articles, they will always tell you to first tidy yourself up in the morning
Hmm.
physically. Hence, you go to the loo, you brush your teeth, you wash your face, you tidy yourself up, and then start to tidy the environment around you. You feel a lot more clearer in your life and in your day.
Hmm.
Similarly, when you do your movement in the morning, when you do, for example, some basic simple stretches and some breathing exercises, there is more flow to your day
Got it.
simply because your mind and your body have opened up to energy.
Awesome. Okay.
Similarly, when you go ahead and you start playing a new sport, or when you start to get more exercise in, or you start to do something new with a certain particular purpose, it starts to change you. Similarly, if you feel that you feel rigid, but you want to use dance to get rid of that rigidity and
Yeah.
become a little more outgoing, it definitely helps. I think it is all in your mind.
Hmm.
So you can go outside in or inside out as long as your intention is inwards.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it definitely helps, even if you start that way.
That's beautiful, Divita. And I understand now. Now I feel like you'd be such a good instructor, Divita, because you not only explain the purpose, but I feel like now I slowly understand the why of dancing. And I know I've not been part of any of your classes, but if you ever do something online, I think it would be awesome for people around the world to not only because I think whenever you are with an instructor, I feel like you have a very strong understanding of the theory and the practice. And I feel like as a student, that would be a really intriguing or interesting combination for me to want to know more. And I feel like I get that from you. So I hope one day you're able to do something digital for more people around the world. I know right now you do offer classes around New York City, and if anyone is in New York City and listening to this, I highly recommend reaching out to Divita and maybe joining one of those classes. But Divita, I know I went off on a tangent with dance, but one of the things I really wanted to understand is that decision you made. I know you studied in Mumbai. You went to university in Mumbai, and then you decided to immigrate to another country to take up a course in dance. So, what was your thought process behind that move? And yeah, I'm just curious about that at this point of time. And then, what was your experience in the course actually like? And this is for someone that wants to take the same path at this point in their life, and yeah.
And it was um, this was a very hard decision for me to make. A lot of my friends who were around me, primarily a lot of dance friends and some college friends, including Soumya and stuff,
Yeah.
um, they saw me go through some real struggle making making up my mind and actually deciding on this. I did not have I mean, I had parents who were supportive, but they were not supportive up to up to such an extent that dance would really be the right answer for me, especially when it came to um, financial freedom and stuff. Um, Also, for me as a person, I'm more of a, I need to have peace in, like, around me in my environment. So in order to keep be stay in the house and stuff like that, I, kind of delayed it.
Mm.
And I'm like, you know what, I'll do university, then I will see. Then I kick the can a little longer. I'm like, I will take 1 year break and I will continue to dance for a bit and then I will see what is it that I want to do. Long story short, I still remember I there was this there was this teacher from New York, a Paul Taylor company teacher from New York who came down for 6 months to work with our academy.
Okay.
And that was around the time when I was thinking whether I'm interested in pursuing dance or not.
Okay.
And I was, with the encouragement of my mom as well as my dad, they're like, if you are interested, start looking up dance courses.
Got it.
So I was looking them up. Um, when he came down, I asked him, what do you think would be the right answer for me? So he asked me whether I had already done university. And I'm like, yeah, I did. I have done bachelor's, but not like in dance. He's like, that doesn't matter, but you already have this kind of experience. So you know what, based on this, maybe he recommended the Perry dance course.
Okay.
And my two mentors in the dance academy I was in India, they encouraged me. They said, if you really want to try dancing, this is the time. You can always go back to another degree later. You cannot go back to dancing. Your body, once it gives up, it gives up. It's not gonna, your body at 40 or 50 is not what what it was at 20.
Correct. Yeah.
So if you want to give this a shot, it is now. And if you choose this now, there's no real going back in the sense that you cannot say, oh, I'm going to try this for a while and then see what happens. It doesn't work like that because trying doesn't get you anywhere.
Yep.
So either you dive in or just simply choose something else.
Got it. So you went full
So
in a lot of ways.
I'll be very, very honest. I still mentally did not go in full out back
Okay.
then. Yes, it was still. I, on a personal level, was scared.
I
I
understand
was
that.
extremely scared. Yes, I hadn't seen anybody except for, of course, my teachers and mentors in that current academy. I hadn't seen enough people make it. I hadn't seen the success rate. And on top of that, I think at that moment, I was also kind of lacking a certain level of self confidence that comes when you go to a bigger pond.
Mm.
Right now, I was kind of big ish in a small pond. But when you go out into the real world, when you come to, say, a New York City,
Yeah.
okay, for the first 2 years, you're going to be in a program, you're still protected. But in that program, you also get to rub shoulders with industry dancers who are coming to take those same classes.
Wow.
And that is when reality hits you. It's like, oh my God, I, I was not expecting this. My first year, I actually honestly got only about 6 months of in studio, like studio time,
Okay.
because right after that, pandemic hit. So that was another story,
Wow.
which which made my dance journey over here very interesting. But we'll touch on that later. But even in those 6 months, it was really tough for me. Immediately within those 6 months, I'm like, I need a break.
Oh,
I
so was
couldn't
it,
keep up.
was it that intense in terms of, because I think you were dancing with really competent other dancers, and was it the structure of the class, the nature of the dance form, or
It was everything. It was, you suddenly came into the presence of a lot of people, a lot of dancers who had been dancing from their teen or preteen years. And they were very accustomed to the movement. Even if they were relatively new to that coach or that teacher, they knew what to expect. I didn't. A lot of my program students, my fellow students, had already been to New York once or twice
Mm.
and trained for a month, if not a little longer, before choosing the program. This, I was here at the age of 25, leaving everything behind, leaving pretty much all the options behind, and saying, this is what I want to do.
Mm.
It was hard.
I
It was
totally
hard.
relate to that.
It was especially hard because I also used to hear from my dear and close ones that you're actually a pretty smart, intelligent girl. You can make a career in whatever it is that you choose. So you don't necessarily have to rely and depend on this decision of having chosen dance. So I always had that option to get out.
Got it. Yeah.
And I think subconsciously I was always looking at, is this my option to get out? Is this the sign I'm supposed to be looking at? So that really messed with my head. So it took me a while to really settle into this role and idea of being a dancer, to imbibe it and become a dancer.
Wow. That
That
and that
was a huge, that
and
was a huge
and is
transformation.
that, but do you feel like that is a process each dancer goes through individually?
Oh, yes.
They do.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I have seen some really good dancers get up one day and say, they're done.
Wow.
They are young. They just don't want to pursue it anymore. It's too
Wow.
much.
Because it
They're like, no, we don't want to do it.
Yeah, because it this seems like, I mean, as someone listening to you, it seems like it's as much a mental process as it is a physical process, and
Yeah.
I think both of them need to combine together for you to truly imbibe that identity of being a dancer. Because I think when you are actually performing, or whether it's a class or an actual performance, um, you are there. I mean, everyone's emotional and physical state is dependent on how you present yourself on the stage. And I assume those doubts can also, you know, jump into the performance. But I think this is really fascinating, like hearing you talk about this, Divieta. And what was the structure of that course? I mean, I know you said it was 2 years. So, um, like, do you learn in a classroom? Do you learn in a performance space? And then the second year is like a co-op where you work with other dancers. So how is that course structured?
The course was structured more around technique than performance. We
Okay.
got a lot of, or at least we were supposed to get a lot of performance opportunity. However, it didn't really work out that way simply because of the pandemic. So a lot of things were restricted for our batch.
I
We
see.
basically graduated during pandemic.
Yeah.
Um, so the structure basically was that we had regular ballet Monday to Friday. We had two technique classes in American modern forms,
Okay.
and a couple of compulsory classes to take in contemporary movement, primarily with different instructors. And those contemporary classes would change every semester for us.
Okay.
On top of which, we were given the freedom to choose two other classes which we would like to take,
Oh, okay.
our electives. And every batch had kind of their own, uh, you know, kind of guidelines to choose their electives.
Okay.
And like, for example, in our batch, it was a little more strict to choose like more on the contemporary side rather than anything commercial, because at Perry Dance we also have a lot of commercial teachers very well known in the industry who come and teach.
Hmm.
However, we were encouraged to take more contemporary classes at that moment simply because we were in the contemporary ballet track. So basically, this was the structure for 4 years, along with which we also had some theory classes like understanding dance history, understanding anatomy, understanding also the history of not just concert dancing, but street dancing, especially the one which came up in New York as well as in the rest of the United States. So plus we also had things like, I think, composition.
Mm-hmm.
How is it that you can create a piece, or also understanding a little bit of stage management. So
Got it.
these were some of the theory classes which we had. So basically, the idea was that you're a pre-professional who's going to be exposed to various other concepts,
Hmm.
of dancing, and you're not just going to be dancing. In this program, I also came across some dancers who were not pre-professional, but they were actually kind of professional in their country.
Hmm.
But in order to kind of naturalize into the industry over here, you have to go through basically a program.
I
That's
understand.
the easiest way for you to get to work over here. So, for example, there is currently still a senior of mine. I consider her my senior, and from India itself, who is still enrolled in a program in Perry dance simply because she needs to naturalize into the industry over here.
I see.
Though she is completely capable of working as a professional in this industry, but
Hmm.
that's just the process. And I see that coming from so many other countries, not just India, Japanese dancers and Korean dancers and this and that. A lot of them, they are already professionals, but they just have to go through this process.
So it seems like
But
a credential that you need to have to be
kind of,
able. Got it.
kind of, I think that is also kind of how the American system works.
Hmm.
Also, and now that I'm noticing, it's not anymore just in America. It's also kind of spreading to various other countries, primarily because of immigration, policies.
Hmm.
It's not that easy to just score a job
I see.
abroad like the way it was during our parents' time. You couldn't just like apply, and if you got through, they would help you with your visas and you could come in.
Yeah.
It's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
But my program, to get back to the point, my program was more on the technical aspect of movement and dancing, and yeah, but it basically exposed me to a big range of motion from a very clear codified way to a very free will way of moving.
Hmm.
So this entire range gets covered.
Wow.
And 2 years is not enough. You want to just keep going through it,
Yeah.
you always learn.
But I think that the fact that that formal training, I think it prepared you to be able to not only understand the entire gamut of possibilities in the world of dance, but also eventually get to a point where you can not only innovate and tinker with the forms and the styles, but maybe even create your own sort of product. I mean, or your own sort of form or style of dance, right? Devata? And I think, do you think you'd be able to sort of get the same experience without that formal structure in that institute?
Absolutely not.
Mm.
Absolutely not. Be it this institute or the various other institutes. Either way, I personally like the idea of sitting for a few hours with a professional to sit and actually learn things. That's
Mm.
how I like. I'm a little traditional that way, and I don't personally believe any other way of getting into this industry would have worked for me.
Interesting.
So, for example, even back home, um, while we were working with that academy, we
Mm.
also had to train. And training is the time when you have to be aware. And I think I was one of those dancers, usually in the studio, who was always trying to really focus on what the instructor was saying. I didn't like zoning out as much.
Got it.
Sometimes, yes, of course, it gets a little too monotonous, or like there's this particular similar way of working, but then by the end of the day, just focusing on what the instructor is saying
Mm.
helps you a lot. So you do need that formal way of working, just
Mm.
like in any other discipline, to actually make it or start off, so that after a while of getting that formal training, you can slowly start to peel the layers to create something else.
Wow, that's that's amazing. Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways that follows the structure that most other professions have. And I think for a young dancer listening to this video, this podcast, I think this is great guidance because they understand the benefits of a formal program like that. So, Divita, I want to be respectful of time, and I thank you so much for giving me, that insight into that program and structure. But I wanted to also delve on your experience moving to another country, and what it's like to, not only study in another country, but be an immigrant in such a time in the world. Because just like you, I think in 2019 I moved to Canada, and I graduated from Teachers College during the pandemic as well, and it was really hard. Just being in school during the pandemic, we had to go into classrooms where kids were wearing masks, sitting in rows really far away from each other. So, what was the experience moving to another country like for you, and how are you navigating, some of the challenges and the highs of being an immigrant?
I think moving to another country, it was hard as it is prior to the pandemic. The pandemic did not make it easier. Luckily for me, I kind of settled well with people who I get to know. And I had good roommates. I had two, three friends who I knew from school, even over here. So just that little bit of support helped me a lot. Second, I also kind of grew up independent in a way simply because I was in a boarding school, so I knew how to stay away from family.
Hmm.
So that kind of helped me continue living without my parents over here.
Okay.
And then I was also kind of every week I was in touch with them. So just that kind of slowing down the pace of life during pandemic helped me get through it,
Mm.
because suddenly I was not rushing towards a goal. I was slowing down the pace to see why I'm doing what I'm doing and what is of importance to me. And various things changed in my life too during that time. So
Mm.
while it wasn't an easy journey, it was a journey worth having. And it is still a journey which is taking me somewhere. And I slowly learned how to use that to my advantage to try and go where I want to go.
Wow.
So, you have to, like, I still have issues of kind of like understanding how the credit system works, or like, what is this healthcare they have? These things just don't make sense to me because I don't come from a very capitalist country. I come from a kind of socialist capitalist mixed country.
Sure.
So it's like, this makes no sense. It's all crazy. Being an immigrant, you do not get the advantage of having credit.
Mm.
Whereas, you may just be way better at managing your money than so many other people you may see around you.
Yeah.
But you don't. So it can be very, very, very frustrating because you see everything moving around you, but you may be missing out. But when you are an immigrant, you need to understand one step at a time solves a lot more than trying to take 100 in various directions.
True. Yeah. You try to take a day on day, right? In a lot of
Yeah.
ways, right? Yeah. And I completely relate to that as well, Devita, because I think as an immigrant, sometimes you can't take things for granted, because you have a lot invested in your life in this other country. But there are also times when, you just feel alone because you're away from family. And I think in a lot of ways, friends become family at that point of time in your
Yeah.
life as well, right? And Devita, I wanted to also, talk about your favorite dancers or dance performances, because I think a lot of your friends and other colleagues will be listening to this, but also young dancers, that want to take up, dance professionally. So is there someone or, any websites or any dancers who've really inspired you that you would recommend we can look up?
I will be very honest. I am not. um, I do not know how to pronounce their names, but I post a lot of their stuff on my stories.
Okay.
But for me, I'm most fascinated by contemporary dancers who
Got it.
come from a balletic background. And I like contemporary dancers with a lot of intention and way of storytelling in an artistic, ambiguous way. And so therefore, like, there are different companies here and there which I follow. You can always look at my Instagram. I keep posting their stories, etc.
Which I will include.
And
I'll include in the show notes, Divita. And if anyone does want to follow Divita, I think 1 hour is just not enough to really understand everything about her work. But please do follow Divita right after this conversation. But sorry, go ahead, Divita.
yeah, so you can see a lot of those things there. That's all.
Awesome, yeah, and I think that's great. Like apart from dance, Divita, I know we've spoken about dance so much. Like, what are some of your other interests and hobbies that that you really
Personal
enjoy?
growth.
Okay, and what would that like look like?
I right away, I just feel that for me, one thing which is of utmost importance is if you want to live a good life, you
Mm-hmm.
need to be self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot be unaware of what you're doing, what you're setting, what you're thinking, what you are, how you're talking, how you're behaving, how you're living if you want to grow.
Got it.
So a lot of growth oriented content is something I'm extremely interested in. So sometimes I also kind of think of what is it that I want to do after dancing
Yeah.
professionally. I usually feel I'm more inclined towards coaching,
Wow.
and I'm not interested in just coaching
Yeah.
dancers, but I'm interested in coaching them, not just physically, but for example, mentally and psychologically.
Mm.
It is that is what my journey is taking me because it's not easy. A lot of things, understanding life and understanding so many things that are happening around us, which in our generation we are aware of.
Mm.
You know, we have social media, we will always know politically, economically, socially what is happening, and that affects us. And that also starts to affect our perception of what we want to do in our life and whether that career option or that profession is fulfilling our purpose.
Mm.
So these things are of great importance to me.
Wow. And I think you'd be great as because you're very easy to talk to, Divita, and I think that is something that a lot of professions um really would benefit from, and I think coaching would be something that would definitely be up your alley. And for me, like for personal growth, I often look at reading as an avenue that has really helped me open up my world. And um, I think podcasts were another like source for me to hear other experiences and other worldviews. But I think reading was one avenue that changed my life. But and will you be using Instagram to maybe talk more about the personal growth side as well, Divita? Or
I usually do not use Instagram for that.
okay.
I don't. I don't know why that is. Sometimes I just feel that everyone has so much going on that I don't really need to be the one telling them. There's
Yeah.
already so much content out there for you to read that
Yeah.
if you're interested in reading them. But if there's anybody who's ever interested in talking about these things, I am always open to, you know, discussing, like getting in touch with people and helping them through these things and maybe even, getting ideas from them, opening my mind to what they feel and think. It's always, and I think that comes from having compassion. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and just to like the last question I wanted to ask you, Divita, again. I actually read this in another, I heard this in another podcast. I think it's the Tim Ferriss podcast, and he had this question where he'd ask his listeners or his guests. I mean, if you had a large billboard with one saying that everyone could read about, um, I actually have the question here. 1 minute. I wrote this down because I really wanted to ask this to you. So, if you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, metaphorically speaking, getting a message out to millions or billions, what would it say and why? It could be a few words or a paragraph. if helpful, it can also be someone else's quote. So, what would your two words or line or paragraph be? And this could be like, I think in New York, it's what's that place? Manhattan has that big central square. It's
Times Square.
Times Square. I'm sorry. You have Central Park and Times Square. So, what would that sign be over there?
Of recent, I've been feeling and thinking of no one is stopping you.
Hmm, I like that.
And there are so many, none of which are coming to my mind right now. Because like I was kind of expecting this question, but when the moment arises, it just goes like poof, out of your mind.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say, no one is stopping you.
Awesome. Yeah. And on that note, thank you, Divieta. This was amazing. I am really excited to follow your journey as a professional. I think you have so much to give the world, and I hope that in a small way, this was a visual archive of your thinking at this point of time. I really think that if I chat with you 1 year, 2 years, or 4 years down the line, you'll be a completely different person with. And I hope I get to do that. And I've caught you on the way up. You're going to be a wonderful dancer and do so much for the world. But thank you again. For the listeners, please do follow Divieta. I will be linking her social handles in the show notes. And do reach out to her about her work in dance, but also in the other areas that she's highly passionate about. And until then, please keep listening for more interesting interviews with some amazing people around the world. Devita, thank you so much again. If there's anything else you want to say before we end the chat?
No, I just want to thank you for having me. I really was not expecting anyone to reach out to me right now, especially because of recent, I've not really been posting that much content on my Instagram. So, when you're not as active, suddenly a lot of people kind of, start looking at other things because that's just the nature of our social media with Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah.
So when you reached out to me, I was like, yes, it's been a while since, I've had a chat with somebody. So yes, let's go ahead and do it. And thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you did. And I truly enjoyed it. I didn't even realize this 1 hour passing by this quick. Plus, I had a very long day and I don't even feel tired anymore. I just feel like I love talking about these things. So this
And
just kind of brought my energy levels up. So thank you for that.
that's awesome. And I hope you do more of this, Devita. I think you will be an amazing teacher and coach and instructor. But I hope you go into the digital space at some point because I think the world needs more amazing teachers like you. And as a teacher, I can completely see that in you. And hopefully, I'm able to attend one of your dance classes someday. But thank you again. And for the listeners, keep listening and keep learning and stay tuned for more such episodes from Learning Stories.